Amsterdam was directed by David O. Russell and stars Margot Robbie, Christian Bale, John David Washington, Robert De Niro, Anya Taylor-Joy, Rami Malek, and a whole bunch of talent, and I'm very excited to give you guys my review for this movie. If you've seen it, be sure to leave a comment on what you thought about it. As well, be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Now let's get into this review. In the 1930s, three friends witness a murder and are framed for it and uncover one of the most outrageous plots in American history. Now, initially, I was very excited for this movie as soon as I saw the cast for this. All these actors I think are great, so I was excited for it. Then the reviews came out and they weren't very good, so I was a bit more skeptical about it, but I got to watch it the other night and I went in with an open mind just to see what it was like. Maybe it's going to work for me. And for me, unfortunately, it was fairly disappointing. Maybe not quite as bad as some people think it is, but for me, it was still pretty weak and kind of surprisingly weak because while I've not seen anything that this director has made before, I know of some other films he has directed, and for the most part, people really like some of his movies. So I was hoping this would be another great film, and unfortunately, it just fell flat. For me, one of the biggest issues with this movie is I found it hard to follow at times, and when it was hard to follow, it made it hard to be invested in what was going on, and not being invested made it more difficult for me for trying to keep paying attention to what was going on. So that really hurt this movie. It just hard to follow, and it just made it hard for me to really care what was going on, and I just wasn't overall invested in the story or the characters. And this movie, I think, is too long as well. There are a lot of parts where I thought they could have trimmed down the scenes because there were times when the story just felt like it just meandered right off course of what the main story was. Especially at the beginning. At the beginning of this movie, they're pretty quick to set up what the main plot is about, and then after they've set it up, they sort of meander off that plot and go do like a big flashback scene. And this flashback scene or sequence, it's a good chunk of time. I'm not sure exactly how long it was, but it was a decent runtime for that section, and I felt like that section of this movie was setting up the characters more than the story. It had elements that were going to benefit for the overall story, but it was more for the characters, and it's good to set up your characters so the audience cares about the characters. Unfortunately, when you've also already set up the main storyline, it just feels like the movie just stops to a whole, and it just detours, and it makes the movie feel long. And this movie's about 2 hours and 15 minutes. I do think it could have been shorter, partly because of this, but other scenes would meander as well. But this was the big part where it just, for me, just completely went off the main storyline. And I think there's other movies that do that same technique where they sort of set up the movie and then go back and do flashbacks for things that happened in the past, but they do it better because while those scenes set up the characters as well, they do a better job of setting up the main story so we get what's happening. Whereas I felt like for this movie, I don't know how much that flashback scene, those flashback moments really helped with understanding the main story. It was more for the characters, which again, that's fine, but for the main story, it's like, for me, I'm not sure if it really added much, which wasn't good because it just felt like the movie just stopped because like, okay, this is where we're going. As the movie just stops, we detour for like, I want to say like 15, maybe 20 minutes. Could have been less, it just felt long. And then we go back to the main story. And when that happens, I sort of check out. Yeah, the characters were fine in this. I wasn't particularly invested in the characters, even though they took all that time to invest in them. I enjoyed the actors. I think the actors and their performances are what sort of held this movie up. Didn't hold it up enough to save this movie, but it made it watchable at least. The characters overall I just found were fine. I wasn't too invested in them. It was more the actors I was invested in because it's a great cast, and at times I was sort of like, it felt like the cast was sort of like how they're like showing us all these casts to keep us entertained and distracted from not a great plot. That's kind of how I felt. It probably wasn't what they're trying to do. It just sort of felt like that to me. the characters were fine. I did enjoy some of the dynamics and the scenes between Christian Bale, Margot Robbie, and John David Washington. They had some nice scenes together, and I enjoyed them. Again, a lot of that was thanks to due to those actors, because I really like those actors. So some of those scenes were good. But as the movie went along, again, it's sort of hard to follow at times. There were characters I was like, who's this they're talking about again? And this and this. All that. And it was also too bad. I felt like there were things that could have been done just to make this movie more interesting, because watching this, like, there's nothing that made it feel like a clever movie or more exciting into the mystery of what was going on. And yeah, the mystery wasn't much for me anyway. For me overall, I think there could have been a good movie with this had they maybe focused the story a bit more so it wasn't as complicated to follow, trim down the runtime with some of those scenes, and maybe find a way to add more twists and turns to make it more exciting and engaging and more clever, because the execution of this movie just sort of felt kind of bland, to be honest. Like, for me, the best praise I can give this movie is the performances. All the actors I thought were doing a good job, and the actors made this movie watchable and probably better than it would have been with other actors that just weren't as good. But the story itself just really sort of fell flat for me, and it was a pretty disappointing movie. It was watchable thanks to those actors, but they weren't able to save this movie, unfortunately. For me, I would give Amsterdam a 49%. This was just a hard to follow and kind of bland movie that I just couldn't get invested in, unfortunately. But guys, if you have seen it, let me know what you thought about it. Maybe you enjoyed it. If so, let me know why. Or if you're like me who didn't like it, let me know your reasons for not liking it. Also, be sure to stay tuned for some more reviews coming soon. And as always, be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. And until my next video, take care, everybody.